Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Emma Kurth, and I'm one of the training specialists with the Child Care Center Licensing Unit. Today, we will go over information on the process to obtain a license for a child care center in Minnesota. We hope to offer you helpful information and a connection to a variety of available resources that have been developed through the state to support you as you embark on this adventure of starting a child care center. I'm joined today by one of our licensing supervisors, Jay Condon, and licensors Mindy Peterson and Ashley Stentz are also here to work behind the scenes and answer any questions that may come up in the chat. I will be presenting our material to you today along with Jay, and our panel will be assisting with any questions that come up in the chat, like I said. We also have some guest speakers for today's session from some of our partner agencies, and you'll get to hear from them throughout the session. Most importantly, we're happy to have you all here who are interested in starting a child care center. This training is being recorded and will be available on our website within a few weeks as soon as we can get it transcribed. Meanwhile, a recording of a previous training is available on our webpage. Slides are not distributed for this presentation. However, an interactive handout is available and was emailed to you yesterday afternoon on whichever email you registered for the event with. Lines are muted, but the training is designed to be interactive. So as you have questions come up, please put them in the chat box. Make sure to submit questions to everyone, as others may have the same or similar questions to you. And the panelists are here to help answer those throughout the presentation. And if questions are sent to the host or the presenter, we may just not see them in a timely manner. Our hope for today is to provide you with information and resources to help you as you get started on this. And at the same time, we want to stress that most importantly, there are a great deal of supports that have been developed to assist you through the process, and as well as in the industry once you're already licensed. So we are going to cover a lot of content today. Don't feel overwhelmed by it. We really value what you do and what you want to be doing on behalf of children, and we want to see you succeed. We, as a part of the licensing division of DCYF, we love having conversations about statute and rule, and when you have questions on licensing regulations, anyone in our unit will spare no time in getting down to the basics and wanting to help break down statute and rules so that you can understand it better. Our goal for this series is to reach those at the very early stages interested in learning how to obtain a child care center license, plant seeds of information, and build a foundational knowledge for you. We also know that the keys to success for programs are the variety of resources that are out there that can provide you with help. So we thank you for being here today and wanting to learn. This presentation is not a replacement for all the rules and statutes governing licensed child care centers in Minnesota. So while we are providing guidance about rule and statute and connecting you to resources and support, we are not providing you with a comprehensive list of all that's required to start up a child care center business. We're not providing legal advice or activities on curriculum or quality standards outside of what's required by Minnesota licensing requirements. So let's get started. The first part of the presentation will cover types of childcare. Is a child care center right for you? What is licensing and why does licensing matter? And who else matters in this sphere? So some resources and other requirements for you to be aware of at this early part of the process. On this slide is a visual representation to help illustrate childcare in Minnesota. Minnesota's law starts with requiring that all childcare provided needs to be licensed unless an exclusion is met. Licensure provides the necessary oversight to ensure that childcare is provided in a healthy and safe environment by qualified people while meeting the developmental needs of all children in care. The 2014 federal reauthorization of the Child Care and Development Block Grant Fund required all states to require health and safety standards and monitor for compliance for any programs that participate in child care assistance program. During the 2017 legislative session, state legislators enacted changes to bring the state of Minnesota into compliance with that federal Child Care and Development Fund. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families Licensing Division is responsible for granting child care center licenses and monitoring licensed child care centers. We have provided additional information in today's handout that explains each type of care and where to find more information. For application or licensing requirement questions, a licensor on call is available Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 by phone at the number you see here on the slide in the first box, or by emailing that email in the first box. And for any training related questions or comments or feedback, you can contact the Child Care Center training specialist by emailing that second email in the second box. To reference and learn all the exact statutes or rules that as a license holder you'll be required to know and comply with, you can search directly from the website of the Office of the Reviser of Statutes. This is a searchable site for all Minnesota statute, session laws, and rules. A link to the Office of Reviser of Statutes is included in your handout. And we strongly recommend that as you get started, you add this site to your bookmarks or favorites on your computer. Once you're in the site, you can pull up any statute or rule, and by using Control F, it allows you to search by keyword. And this is really helpful when you're trying to get through a lot of text on rule and you're looking for something very specific like ratios or orientation requirements. You can also use the Authenticate PDF feature to create a printable PDF and be able to just print it right off the site. The site is updated after each legislative session as updates or changes to the requirements occur. So as a licensing unit, we want to remind all license holders of the responsibility that comes along with operating a licensed business. And while there are many resources available to help understand rule and statute, also becoming familiar with searching the statute and rule yourself is important. Compliance to these applicable requirements and rule statute is required for a DCYF Child Care Center license to remain in good standing. There are many pieces to the puzzle of operating a childcare business in Minnesota, and licensing is just one piece. In addition to the handout for this session, we also have a resource guide in that same email that was sent out to you with a variety of resources that might help you learn more about running a childcare business in Minnesota. In addition, our partners from other state agencies offer information that might be helpful as you plan out and then later operate your licensed business. We have included links to where you can subscribe for each of the agencies that you see in the tiles on the slide for updates that may be of interest. You can sign right up for their Gov delivery and get it right in your email. As you see on the slide, there are several agencies that we work with and that work independently to support and guide businesses. And we've highlighted that here. So you see the Minnesota Department of Human Services. This is where the Background Studies Unit and the Provider Hub Unit live. The Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. This is where you can find a wealth of information on small business information and support. The Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. This is where all of the labor laws, workers' compensation, insurance questions, understanding OSHA standards, things like that will all live here. The U.S. Small Business Administration. This is a site that offers various trainings, information, resources for small businesses, including a small business learning platform. The Minnesota Department of Education. This is where you can find information on curriculum standards, early educator support. The Minnesota Department of Public Safety. This is where you'll find child passenger safety information and the Minnesota Safety Council. The Minnesota Department of Health and Local Public Health. This is where you'll find resources like Choose Safe Places Minnesota, which we will talk about in a few slides. This is an initiative to identify and address potential environmental concerns wherever it is that you may be deciding to have your child care center. The State Fire Marshal. This website will have information on fire code for child care centers, and your fire inspection will happen later in your process, but it's important to understand the requirements when you're choosing your location because you'll want to know where your exits are and whether it's going to fit code easily or not. The Minnesota Children's Cabinet. This is a broad interagency partnership. It's co-chaired by the governor and lieutenant governor, and they use a whole family approach to support healthy development of children and families across agencies. And then finally, Local zoning and community guidance. This is community-specific guidelines or requirements for opening a childcare business within a certain city or city limits. So your resource guide has links to all of these agencies, along with links to sign up for their newsletters and updates. We are going to quickly touch on some resources that are helpful right as you begin the process of getting licensed. So our state administration understands that navigating the world of childcare regulations can be complex and confusing. There's a lot to consider. And a few years ago, the state was tasked with creating a way to support people in understanding, navigating all of those resources or puzzle pieces. Wayfinder is one of those resources. It was created to support people as they are applying and going through the process of becoming licensed, and then support them later on if they want to expand or grow their program. It's housed under an umbrella of resources that are administered through a program called Childcare Aware of Minnesota. We will hear more from them later on. Local navigators act as resource guides, making sure that you get connected to as many resources as are available that will help you. And when starting a program, those navigators accompany you through the licensing process. They assess your initial business and program needs. They can make referrals for you to partners, and then help you bring together and put to use all that support and resources that you've received as you launch your business. And one resource that a navigator might connect you with to help you get started on the business side of your child care center is First Children's Finance. And I believe we have Shelly Coons here to talk a little bit more about First Children's Finance in Minnesota. Shelly, are you here?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Hi, and thank you for inviting First Children's Finance to speak with you today. My name is Shelly Coons. I am a business development specialist with First Children's Finance. First Children's Finance has been growing the supply and sustainability of excellent childcare in Minnesota for over 33 years. We provide training and consultation services that focus on and are tailored to the business side of childcare. Due to generous funding from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families and other regional partners, our consultation and training opportunities are offered at no charge to new and existing childcare providers. We offer many one-on-one consultations around the business side of childcare, some which are rate studies that help inform on potential rate structures by providing insight into the current market and childcare assistance program rates. Contract and policy handbook reviews to ensure that your contracts and policies have business-related enhancements included in them, and marketing consults to help you build your story and sell the benefits of your program to families. We also provide startup support and financial modeling consultations to examine your projected revenues and expenses so that you can have an idea of how your program will cash flow once it is up and running. Our business plan consultation is also an excellent opportunity for startup programs who want to further explore how to structure their program. Individuals who are registered with Develop and who participate in our one-on-one business-related consultation services will receive relationship-based professional development, we call that RBPD, credit for the consultation. We offer a wide variety of Develop-approved trainings. These trainings opportunities are free to providers or individuals who are looking to go into the child care industry. All of our training courses are focused on the business side of childcare, and we offer a wide variety of topics that in that realm. We are currently amid our fall training series, which we would love to have you join us for. You can find the list on our website at www.firstchildrensfinance.org under the header for businesses and then training. FCF also offers business leadership cohorts. We call them BLCs for short. These free cohorts are a 4-part training series to touch on a variety of business-related topics such as marketing, enrollment, cash flow, and creating SMART goals to improve upon business practices. When providers attend all 4 sessions along with the 2 required one-on-one consultations, they will receive Develop Approved Credit RBPD hours and a business leadership credential that counts towards the Parent Aware credential. You can find more information on these at our website, www.firstchildrensfinance.org, and click at the top under For Businesses and then Child Care Business Cohorts. More sessions of our training cohorts will be released again for the winter spring series. So if you don't see a training that you want to attend available now, please either check our website periodically at the addresses I mentioned earlier, or follow us on Facebook at First Children's Finance Minnesota as we announce new opportunities through that platform. And finally, FCF offers lending opportunities as well as loans and grants. For information and to reach out to work with us, please email us at infomn@firstchildrensfinance.org. Thank you. And is there any questions?
Thanks, Shelley. And if questions pop up in the chat, feel free to answer them through the chat if we see anything come up.
Thank you.
And if you did not catch the website or the emails, it is all in your handout and resource guide as well. You'll be able to click in and link right to their website. All right, now that we've gone over much of what you need to initially know, let's talk about childcare as a business and how that fits together with licensing. Starting a business in Minnesota is not just a single decision, but a series of decisions you'll make, each one an important step on the path to a successful business. Businesses that do not succeed tend to have similar things in common, and being aware of some of these commonalities and addressing them in your business plan before you start is important. Businesses started by individuals with a lack of business understanding or experience, a lack of thorough preparation, or a lack of capital are unlikely to succeed. And that's why we find it important to try to plug you into some of these resources that can help you build that knowledge. And the first step is to decide whether you have the right stuff to become a successful entrepreneur, the right skills, training, and the commitment. And so today we are sharing how to prepare to own a childcare business in Minnesota, including setting up your childcare business in order to become licensed and accessing local and state resources to support those business needs. Once you have determined that opening a childcare center is the right business decision for you and you have an understanding of the basic compliance requirements, as well as where to find additional support when questions arise, you'll need to determine your business structure, secure a location, and decide how your center will run day to day. For childcare center licenses, one of 3 options for business entities are available for license holders. Applicants will need to indicate whether their childcare center will be owned by an organization, a government entity, or by an individual. And this slide provides a little more detail about the various types of business entity. Ownership refers to the owners of a business, as well as the person who provides governance and leadership in an organization or a government entity. When applying for a childcare center license, an applicant is required to provide ownership information. Whether the applicant is an individual, an organization, or a government entity, and how the business is set up will determine who is identified as a controlling individual. A link to the document titled "Who or What Are Your Controlling Individuals" can be found in your handout. And this document is intended to help applicants with designating their controlling individuals and determining who should be one. When you apply, you'll need to upload verification for the type of entity your business is. Applicants that are organizations or individuals must submit formal documents verifying the business structure and registration with the Secretary of State's office with the application. Most mostly all licensed childcare centers are set up as organizations, not individuals. For programs that are structured as a government entity, a letter of verification that the applicant is indeed part of a government entity, like a school district program, that the program has approval and is acknowledged as a program within that larger government entity, must be included as part of the application submission. You will be asked to identify which type of program your business is designated as. Minnesota statutes list those 3 types of entities that may apply for a child care center. And again, that's an individual, an organization, or a government entity. License applications from an individual are extremely rare, like I said in the last slide. More common is that license applications are from organizations. An individual that is applying as an owner often sets up an LLC for the childcare business and the license application and applies as an organization through that LLC. The name, address, and phone number fields on the application for the applicant should be the same as is legally registered for the organization or government entity or individual. For example, if a church is opening a childcare center and is completing the application for a license, the church would be the eventual license holder. Therefore, you would add the church's official name as registered with the Secretary of State, the registered address, and the phone number for the church in the section for the applicant. Or say a program will be called Rosie's Childcare Center, but it's registered with the Secretary of State as Thompson Business LLC. Rosie's Childcare Center would be what's entered in the previous section, identifying the program. But in this section, where an applicant must identify the applicant, the registered business name, Thompson Business LLC, would be entered here. To learn more about these types of business structures, Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development has a webpage that helps businesses learn more and the process for establishing a business. When completing information about the applicant, there are fields to enter the Social Security number for the applicant, the federal tax ID, and state tax ID numbers. If an individual is applying for a license, the individual's Social Security number is required. If your business structure is an organization or a government entity, the application requires you to instead document the Federal Employer Identification Number and the Minnesota Tax Identification Number for the business. Your Federal Employer Identification Number, sometimes called an EIN, is a 9-digit identification number. You need it to pay federal taxes, hire employees, open a business bank account, and apply for business licenses and permits. The state tax identification number is a 7-digit number used to identify a business and pay Minnesota business taxes. You need it to withhold income taxes from employees' wages and make business tax payments. The Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development Small Business Hub has information regarding tax IDs and a link to obtaining a state tax ID and also a federal tax ID number from the IRS. And again, links to Department of Employment and Economic Development will be in your handout and your resource guide. A controlling individual is defined as an owner of the program, the chief executive officer, the chief financial officer, and each managerial official whose responsibilities include the direction of the management or the policies of the child care program. In addition to providing information on the controlling individual or individuals, the applicant must also identify an authorized agent, sometimes called the AA. The first controlling individual identified when applying will be considered the authorized agent on the license. An authorized agent is defined as the controlling individual responsible for communicating with the licensing department, and this is who the licensing department will send all notices and orders to. Any one of the controlling individuals could be designated as the authorized agent. All controlling individuals must pass a Department of Human Services background study as part of the license application process. The Licensed Child Care Center webpage has a worksheet. As I mentioned a couple slides back, it's called Who or What Are Your Controlling Individuals? And this can be really helpful in determining who should be listed as what. And this can be found either through your handout or on our website. If you're familiar with our website, it's under Forms and Other Documents, Resource Documents for Licensed Childcare Centers. And that will help kind of walk you through who should be doing what. Licensed childcare centers are required to comply with background study requirements, as in Minnesota Statutes 245C. And an email with process instructions for enhanced fingerprint studies is sent to that authorized agent of the program after you submit your application. The program authorized agent will designate someone as the Sensitive Information Person, sometimes called the SIP or the SIP, who will have access to sensitive information within the background study system, which is called Net Study 2.0. License holders are responsible for ensuring background studies are completed as required, and all controlling individuals must be cleared before a license can be granted. Even if they're not planning to be working on site, they still must have that background study. And of course, all staff need to be cleared before working. Many resources have been developed to help people understand and get through this background study process, which can be sometimes hard to understand the process for. And again, once your application is through, you will receive instructions on starting the process. But it's important to talk about it now before you get started so you know what's to come for your program. And moving on to the organizational chart. An organizational chart, sometimes called an org chart, must be submitted when applying for a child care center license. An organizational chart is essentially just a visual chart that represents the structure of your company. It highlights how teams and departments are organized, the reporting structures across the organization, and every individual's role, title, sometimes responsibilities. The chart must list all of the controlling individuals, officers, or owners with their respective titles, and the individual designated as the authorized agent. The organizational chart is not required to be submitted on an official form. You can draw it, you can make it in a Word document, as long as it's legible and clearly identifies those required components, the structure that's needed, that are specified in Minnesota Statutes 142B.10, subdivision 1. And that again will be in your handout, that specific language. You will also be asked to upload proof of workers' compensation compliance. Workers' compensation insurance is required for all licensed childcare centers. Applicants must have a policy in place prior to submitting their application, even if that policy won't start until the program is licensed. The Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry has a Certificate of Compliance Workers' Compensation Law form that can be filled out, signed, and then uploaded into the Provider Hub for your application. Filling out this document with complete information is important. If the form is not properly completed, it may prompt a request for additional information to be submitted. We have a link to the Department of Labor and Industry form on our Child Care Center licensing application webpage, which you can access through our main webpage. Or you can search the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry website, where the form and more information on workers' compensation requirements can be found. Before submitting an application, applicants must have a location designated where the child care services will be provided. When finding a location, there are multiple considerations to take into account. You will be required to submit a specific address with your application. And that address may be a location such as part of another business, like a church or a community center, where specific space will be designated to be used exclusively for the childcare during the hours of operations. The address may be a location that's part of another building with a completely separate space, such as a location within a strip mall. Alternatively, the address may be a location where childcare will be provided in a freestanding building. Additionally, the address can be a future location where a building will be built for the childcare center. You'll be required to submit the specific address with your application. However, you may or may not currently own, lease, or have possession of the space on that address. However, you will need to have enough of an agreement regarding the purchasing, leasing, or possession of the space that will allow for required components of the application. Before a license is granted, you will need to own, lease, or have possession of that space. Additionally, the local zoning authority will need to approve the location to be used for childcare services. And you will want to ensure that during the application process, the facility will pass inspections by other agencies, including health, building, and fire. Childcare center licensing laws in Minnesota have specific requirements related to indoor facility and outdoor space where childcare will occur. It's highly encouraged that applicants consider all of the childcare center licensing requirements, any enhancements to the facility to make the space suitable for group childcare, the usable square footage, the outdoor activity area, and the operation plan when choosing a facility and a location. It's also too important to consider any hazards or potential environmental toxins when choosing a facility to ensure the location is safe for childcare. MDH has a variety of resources that are available to help programs better understand and ensure that their businesses operate in environmentally safe locations. One in particular is called Choose Safe Places Minnesota. And this is a free program that will help you before you decide on a location to better ensure that that location is safe from any environmental contaminants. And information about how to learn more about Choose Safe Places Minnesota is available in the handout and the resource guide. Now we're going to talk a little bit about facility requirements. And facility requirements can be found in Rule Part 9503.0155. That number is also up on the bottom of the slide. Understanding the various requirements for your facility can be difficult. So do your homework before submitting your application to ensure that you understand the various local, county, or state requirements for your facility. In order for a license to be granted, licensing will require zoning approval. Zoning is the first stop for anyone who wants to know if a childcare center is allowed at the proposed address. Zoning approval is based upon the zoning laws of the area in which the facility is located. Licensing will send a request for zoning approval to the local authority after an application is received. However, it would be wise for an applicant to look into zoning requirements during the process of choosing a location to ensure that everything goes smoothly at that time. In addition to zoning approval, all childcare center applications will need building, health, and fire inspection approvals before a license is granted. The building inspection ensures that the space will meet all local building codes and building requirements specific to childcare. The health inspection will be conducted by a state or local health inspector. The health inspection determines whether a food license is needed, and this is depending on the level of food preparation and handling that will occur at the childcare center. If a food license is required, the health inspector will ensure the facility meets the food code requirements for Minnesota Rules, Chapter 4626. Fire inspections must be conducted by the state fire marshal. The fire inspection ensures that the facility meets all fire code requirements for childcare centers. As with zoning, it's recommended that an applicant look into these building, health, fire inspection requirements for their location or the state requirements prior to submitting an application. After an application is submitted, DCYF will initiate the official required inspections. You can find support in understanding the various codes from many different sources. Childcare Wayfinder has local navigators that can help connect applicants with resources. If the building is under construction, your construction company or architect will be able to assist you with understanding the fire and building codes that are needed. The State Fire Marshal website has a resource showing the step-by-step process individuals can follow before a fire inspection is requested by DCYF. The state fire marshal has created a resource showing the step-by-step process individuals can follow before a fire inspection is requested by DCYF for a program and application. Your assigned licensor will determine when the inspection should occur and initiate it with the appropriate inspector at that time. You will be instructed to pay a $50 fee for the inspection to the inspector's agency. Right now we're going to move into program information. Program information is the identifying information about the program used to identify and reach the program. It's important to enter information that will be reachable and will be later be identified on your license. The name in this area is the name of the program. The address is the location that is secured to be where the program will operate. The phone number and the email are especially important, as this is how licensing will contact the program if more clarification or corrections with the application or any supplemental documentation is required. Applicants may not yet have a landline installed in their program at this point in the application process, and if that's the case, we suggest a dedicated cell phone for the program. The phone number for the program can be a landline or a cell phone. The phone number entered is considered the center's contact phone number, not the phone number for the authorized agent. Applicants must select whether their program will be a Head Start program, a day program, drop-in, night program, sick care, or school age. Applicants must select at least one service provided, but may select as many services as will be provided. Generally, the most common request is for a day program, and a day program is something that operates during normal waking hours. This is generally considered about 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Operates and provides care for any child for more than 30 days in a 12-month period. Provides care to any child for more than 45 hours in a calendar month. Aside from your typical day program, there are other types of programs that are out there, such as drop-in program, a night care program, sick care program. And with that, it's important to note that rule recognizes and specifies additional requirements that are specific to those types of less typical programs. And therefore, depending on which type of program is designated, there may be additional things to consider or compliance requirements. For example, if you're interested in drop-in or night care or sick care programming, there are additional requirements designated in Rule 9503 that would need to be followed in addition to running a typical child care program. So a few extra requirements. If you choose to have one of these more specific types of programs, you'll go through the typical process to become a licensed program, but you would also need to prepare to comply with the specifics and rule that cover that specific type of program. So it would be a little additional compliance component. You will need to upload a floor plan for your facility and provide room information. Minnesota Rule 9503.0155, again, that's the area where you'll find facility requirements. It explains requirements for the facility and the floor plan. It specifies that indoor and outdoor space to be used for childcare must be designated on what's called your facility floor plan. This space must be exclusively used for childcare by the center during the hours of operation. On the floor plan, label all spaces with the planned use for the space and the estimated size. For example, preschool room, 20 feet by 12 feet. Your assigned licensor will verify all measurements when they are out for your pre-licensing visit. Rule requires licensed programs to have at least 35 square feet of space per child that you're looking to serve. Things like hallways, stairways, closets, the utility rooms or boiler rooms, bathrooms, kitchen, Space occupied by cribs, those types of spaces are not counted as indoor space. So your licensure will be looking specifically at what's available for play and use within your classroom indoor space. You will need to indicate as well the toilets and sinks in the center that will be used by children. The center must have at least one hand sink and one toilet for each 15 children. And one toilet training seat or training chair must be provided for each 15 toddlers. Any hand sink required for children must be in the toilet area. And you must also identify tornado shelters and primary and secondary exits. Lastly, you must identify your outdoor activity area, including dimensions for this space. The outdoor activity area on site must be enclosed with a fence and must be at least 1,500 square feet. If your outdoor space is not on site, you should indicate where the outdoor space is located. If it's a local park that you're walking to, the route that children and staff will be taking to get there. An off-site outdoor activity area must be within 2,000 feet of your program location, or transportation must be provided, but it cannot be more than a half mile from the program. In addition to labeling your floor plan, you will complete the details for each room, outdoor space, and the facility as a whole, and whether it will be used for indoor or outdoor use. You will be asked to identify and enter the square footage of each room or area. The provider hub, will then generate a room capacity based on the square footage that you're entering. The capacity on your license refers to the maximum number of infants, toddlers, preschools, and school-aged children that you're licensed to serve at any time in each space and as a whole for the facility. It's important to note that the number generated by the provider hub will likely not accurately depict the actual capacity and may need to be adjusted because there are several things besides actual room square footage from a floor plan that might contribute to the actual capacity allowed for the space. So while the hub will generate the capacity at this time to give you an estimate, your program's official license capacity will be verified and determined later in the process and will be officially determined when your licensor is there on site for your pre-licensing visit. Things like city zoning requirements, fire and building code requirements, and the size of your physical space can also affect that total. And finally, once your application has been assigned to the licensor, they can help you kind of talk through some of these variables and things and understand what your facility's capacity might be licensed for in the end. Moving into food service. Next, you will check which meals you plan to offer and where each of those meals will be prepared, whether on site, catered, or provided from the child's family, their parents or guardians. Childcare centers are required to ensure that meals and snacks are available to children during licensed hours of operation per Minnesota Rule Part 9503.0145, Subpart 4. Licensed childcare programs must follow USDA meal components for each meal or snack. For example, if parents provide food and the center provides milk and heats the food, then a food license may be required and you will need to ensure that the food provided by the parents meets that USDA nutritional requirement. If not, you'll need to have a backup plan on how you will provide children with a nutritional meal or snack. And based on where food will be prepared, there may be additional requirements that come from the public health department. So if you're planning to prepare food on site, contact the city or your county to find out information about requirements for food service or kitchens and childcare programs in your particular area, because it can sometimes vary from county to county or city to city. Unfortunately, because of this, licensing can't draw a more clear, fine line for whether a food license will or won't be required at the start of your application, because those local health departments have their own sets of rules and requirements for food licenses. So as we discussed with that previous slide, Minnesota rule requires that menus must comply with the nutritional requirements defined by the USDA. If you'll be providing any food to the children in your program, your menu is required to be uploaded in the Provider Hub, and menus will be reviewed during ongoing licensing visits as part of your review cycle. If you will not be providing food, you can bypass that screen where menus are to be uploaded by selecting Next. Your menu must show that each meal provided meets 1/3 of a child's daily nutritional needs. The Minnesota Department of Education has more detailed information on those USDA requirements for child care center license holders and applicants. The Child and Adult Care Food Program, CACFP, provides access to nutritious meals and snacks to infants and children as a regular part of their child care. A variety of public or private nonprofit child care centers, Head Start programs, out-of-school care centers, and other institutions which are licensed or approved to provide childcare services participate in this CACFP program. For-profit centers that serve low-income children may also be eligible to participate in the program. And CACFP reimburses centers at free, reduced price, or paid rates for eligible meals and snacks served to enrolled children, targeting benefits to those children most in need. The next step is uploading policies and procedures developed for your staff, and then uploading the policies and procedures developed for your parents. Each required policy and procedure must be created for the program and include certain specific information. In the Provider Hub, you will be asked to upload each required policy and procedure separately. The Hub will have a designated space for you to upload each separate policy, first in a section titled Policies and Procedures for Staff. And then, once each of those are uploaded, you can advance to the next section titled Policies and Procedures for Parents. Some information is going to be required in both of these policy sections. If an item is required in both sections, it must be uploaded each time the Hub asks for it, unless there's a box to check that allows you to use the previously uploaded policy, and you've checked that box. Only a few of the policies have that feature. And in the following slides, we'll go over the required policies and procedures. We understand that creating all of the required policies for staff and information for parents can be difficult and can take some time. And for that reason, our licensing unit has created a very detailed resource document available to help you better understand the specific requirements of each policy and procedure. And this is called the Guidelines for Developing Policies and Procedures. And you can see a sample shot of it here on the slide. You can find it on the Licensed Child Care Center webpage under the section titled Forms and Other Documents, as well as it's linked in your handout as well. The Guidelines for Developing Policy and Procedures document is designed to help applicants with the creation of these policies and procedures. And with this document, you will be able to follow along and make certain that each required policy and procedure that you're creating is covered for each audience, staff or parents, and it contains the required language. The form is interactive, so you can download it and use an Adobe program to open the document to use it as a checklist right on your computer. You can also print it and do it physically as well. We encourage you even to take the language right out of this document. It's made for you to be able to kind of plug and play into your policies. With a lot of these, You don't need to recreate the wheel. Just take the wording right out of the document, straight from Minnesota rule and statute. For policies like behavior guidance and your allergy policies, it's really important to meet the exact language requirements. And that's what your licensor is going to be looking for. The language that's used in the guideline document already meets all of these requirements. So you don't need to worry about how to phrase it. Just take that behavior guidance language, that allergy language, it's right there. It's exactly what you need. You just need to make sure that the information specified in the document is included in your policies, and wherever it is specific to your program, that you are making it specific to your program as well. Listed on this slide are all of the different policies that are required for staff. The two that are starred are the policies that must be completed using our forms. Those specific forms can be found on the Child Care Center licensing webpage under the Forms and Other Documents section. And by clicking the option of Forms, licensed child care centers must use to document required information. It's a long header, but you'll see it's the required header. The other policy types are not required to be on one of our forms, but they still must include that specific policy information. All of this is explained in that Guidelines for Developing Policies and Procedures document that we just talked about. And now we're going to go over a few of the policies that are required, just to give you some examples of what you'll see and what's expected. We don't have time, obviously, to cover all of these required policies in detail, but we wanted to give some explanation for your reference. And if you use that Guidelines for Developing Policies and Procedures document to help you create your policies, you'll see that resource document provides great detail for each policy. So starting with behavior guidance policies, your program's behavior guidance policy will provide staff with guidance on handling behaviors of children in the program. And it's the first policy that the Hub will ask you to upload. Minnesota Rules Part 9503.0055 has very specific requirements on what needs to be included in this behavior guidance policy. The policy must include specific statements, and the license holder must ensure that the policies and procedures are carried out. And again, using that Guidelines for Developing Policies and Procedures document, as shown here at the top of the slide, this is a snapshot of what you would see if you download that document. It will help you as it specifies some of the exact wording that must be part of your behavior guidance policy. And so, like we talked about before, don't be afraid to use this exact phrasing. For example, this slide shows the portion of the behavior guidance policy from Guidelines document that details what's called prohibited actions. We often see policies not including the wording at or by the direction of the staff person. And we're looking specifically for that language there in your policy. And this wording trains your staff that they cannot perform these prohibited actions against a child, and they also can't instruct someone else to do it instead. So it's important to include that specific, distinct language in your policy. And that's where something like this Guidelines document really comes in handy. And you'll also need to include all of the items that are listed here as prohibited actions. So you just list them out in a list. And as a note before we move on, you can absolutely go above and beyond with your policies and procedures, add specific policies for your own programming and the way you will run your program, but ensure that you have the wordings, these specific wordings for your policies coming from the guidelines, and kind of use it as your guide as you're going through the writing of your policies. Another one of the required policies is the Emergency Preparedness Plan. This is one of the two policies that's specifically called out in statute to be filled out on the DCYF forms. You'll fill this form out and ensure that the information is saved and then upload that document as requested into the Provider Hub. The Child Care Emergency Plan is site-specific. It's a site-specific policy. So even if you are opening a new location you may already have a location, you're opening a new one, you're going to need a new Child Care Emergency Plan specific to this program. And you must submit it with your application as part of your emergency preparedness policies. And as we've talked about before, it must be put on our form because there's a specific information that we're calling out and looking for. This plan outlines what the program will do in the instance of a shelter in place, like a tornado or a lockdown, and in situations where you might need to evacuate the building, like a fire in the program. It also requires procedures for notifying parents and how accommodations are made for infants and toddlers who may not be able to walk themselves out of the building, and for children with a disability or a chronic medical condition, how you as a program will ensure that they have their medically necessary medication, along with procedures for continuing operations and procedures for communicating what's happened with any appropriate officials. In addition, it's important to note that licensed programs are required to make the emergency plan available to parents upon request. As well, identified relocation sites and evacuation routes to those sites must be posted in a visible place somewhere in your center. Staff must be trained on this plan during orientation, prior to any first contact with children, anytime you make a change to the plan, and at least once per calendar year. And additionally, the license holder must review the plan itself. Even if you're not making a change, you must review it yearly. The other policy that must be filled out using our form is the maltreatment of minors reporting policy. There are site-specific fillable sections that must be filled in, such as the contact information for local law enforcement, before uploading it into the Provider Hub. And a copy of this policy is required in both your staff handbook as well as your parent handbook. It's one of those ones where you need it in both spots. And you want to always ensure that you're using the most recent version of our policy. And the best way to do that is just to download it straight from our website and make sure that you have the most recent copy. Moving on into what is called the Risk Reduction Plan. Licensed childcare centers must develop a risk reduction plan that identifies the general risks to children served in care. The license holder must establish procedures to minimize those identified risks, train their staff, and then annually review these procedures. And so for those of you that have been in the field for a long time, risks to children might be rather common sense to you, but remember that you'll be having staff persons coming in with little to no experience sometimes. And while you're not required to use our form, DCYF has created a form that can be used and will help you address and think about many important factors. All of the information being requested on the form is required to be part of your risk reduction plan. So even if you don't put it into our form, you would want to use that guidelines document or this form itself to ensure that you're hitting all of the different topics that are required to be covered. Like we've said before, it's generally most efficient to use our forms because then you're ensuring that you are hitting every single item that you need to be thinking about. Your risk reduction plan takes thoughtful consideration and is considered part of your center's policies and procedures handbook. The risk reduction form has been created to help make certain that programs think through and address a variety of risks that just might be inherent within the building itself or the location. We also hear that this document for your risk reduction plan helps meet the requirement of training your staff on those risks to the children in program and a plan to reduce the risks that are specific to the uniqueness of each program. Make certain that you fill out that form completely and with specific detail. Some of the other policies and procedures that need to be developed will be related to health and safety. There's a variety of health and safety type requirements and policies. Statute and rule require each licensed childcare center to create health policies and have a health consultant review those health policies and practices. While the requirement to have a health consultant will not be verified until phase 2 of your application process, it's important to note that having a health consultant is a requirement for licensed childcare centers. A health consultant is a physician or a public health nurse or a licensed registered nurse or the community health board. The credentials of the health consultant will need to be verified by your assigned licensor before a license will be granted. The center must have a health consultant review the center's health policies and practices and certify that they are adequate to protect the health of children in care. The review must be done before initial licensure, submitted with the application for initial licensure, and repeated each calendar year after initial licensure. For programs serving infants, this review is done a little differently. It must be done initially and then monthly thereafter being licensed versus yearly for a program not serving infants. A copy of the consultant's findings must be kept within the center's administrative record. There are some third-party health policies that we've seen that programs have purchased and used. And it's just as important to note that an applicant should understand the policies they submit for their program, and they are responsible for ensuring they understand them and that all of the required information for each policy is included in that party set. Once you have created and uploaded into the Provider Hub each of those required policies and procedures for staff, you will advance to the step in the Provider Hub where you will upload required information for parents. Generally, the required information for parents is often developed in a parent handbook. And as specified in Minnesota Rules Part 9503.0090 and detailed in our Guidelines for Developing Policies and Procedures resource, there are very specific details of information that must be included in your parent handbook. In addition to the detailed information specified in rule and statute and captured in the parent handbook, programs are also required to develop and share their NAP and REST policy, the maltreatment of mandated reporting policy, and a program grievance policy with parents. Licensed programs are required to inform parents of the program's policy and procedures for behavior guidance. So in the hub, you will need to upload your program's behavior guidance policy twice, once in each section for staff and for parents. You may use the same one, or you can develop one that's more meant to be directed towards parents that shares with them the policy your program will follow, and making certain that it aligns with the one that you'll be sharing in your staff book. Moving on into your child care program plan. This is required. It is a center-specific policy that must be created and submitted with the license application and then maintained thereafter. The plan must be written by a teacher-qualified staff person, and it must be reviewed by a teacher-qualified staff person each year. The documentation of this review must be kept on site, again, part of that administration center file. This plan can be included in a center's parent handbook or the parent policies, and the child care program plan must be available to parents and guardians upon request. The child care program plan is meant to define the center's philosophy, curriculum, an overall approach to the planned experiences that will guide children's growth and development within the program. The child care program plan must include specific items required by licensing. However, it can include more items specific to the child care center's unique approach to child care. Licensing requires that centers will include in their child care program plan a statement that children are supervised at all times, information about the age categories and number of children your program is licensed to serve, the days and hours of operation, a description of the general educational methods used by the program, as well as any religious or political or philosophical basis for the program, if applicable. And additionally, your program must include the goals and objectives that promote physical, intellectual, social, and emotional development of the children within each age category that you're licensed to serve. These goals must be consistent with the child's cultural background and age development. A daily schedule for each age category must be included that includes indoor time, outdoor time, quiet time, active time, teacher-directed and child-initiated activities. These are all things that must be stated within your childcare program plan, as well as daily access to a variety of specific interest areas. And finally, the plan must include a statement on how developmental progress will be documented and kept in the child's file, and that conferences will be offered to share progress with parents and guardians. Licensing requirements for the child care program plan can be found in Minnesota Rules Part 9503.0045, and it's recommended that programs developing or reviewing the child care program plan take time to ensure best practices are considered and consult with other child care professionals as needed as you're building your plan. We're going to touch a little bit on staffing and understanding the staffing needs for a child care program is largely dependent on your program and on specific situations. Knowing how many staff will be needed in order to open and operate will depend on the size of your program and how quickly your program enrollment grows. Regulations related to staff to child ratios, group sizes, staff distribution, staff qualifications, and age categories must be understood in order to keep children safe and maintain that licensing compliance. A child care program will need to recruit and retain early childhood professionals that will qualify as a director, teachers, assistant teachers, and aides that follows Minnesota Rules 9503.0031 through 9503.0034, depending on the number of children being served in your program. There are qualification requirements for each of those roles. You can find more on that in your handout, as well as through that Office of Revisor of Statutes website. A person qualifies for the position based on their own education and their previous work experience. Child care centers are not required to have a director, but if a child care center does have a director, the director must be at least 18 years old, be a graduate of high school or hold an equivalent diploma, and have at least 1,040 hours of experience in staff supervision and 9 quarter credits or 90 hours of accredited coursework in staff supervision, human relations, or child development. There are many different combinations of education and experience for an individual to qualify as a teacher or assistant teacher. Teachers and assistant teachers must be at least 18 years old, and an aide is a staff person who carries out the child care program plan under the supervision of a teacher or assistant teacher. And an aide does not need to document more education or experience. If you go to that Revisor of Statutes website and you go to Rule 3, you will see the specific charts that call out the variety of different ways that a person may qualify for a teacher or assistant teacher. You will need to calculate the number of hours of experience for your staff people, your staff persons, and input that amount of experience. And experience means paid and unpaid employment as a teacher, assistant teacher, aide, or student intern in a licensed childcare center, a licensed family childcare program, a tribally licensed childcare program in any United States, state, or territory, or in a public or non-public school, or caring for children as a staff person or unsupervised volunteer in a certified childcare center, or providing direct contact services in a home or residential facility serving children with disabilities that require a background study under Section 245C.03. Education is verified by college or university transcripts, also referred to sometimes as post-secondary education. Transcripts do not need to be official copies. They can be the kind that are just printed right out of your web portal. And if a variance is needed to qualify a staff person for the requested role due to shortage of required experience or education, personnel variances can be requested and submitted with your licensure. Once you have your personnel hired and know which role each of them qualifies for, you can begin creating a staff distribution plan. As a license holder, you must ensure requirements for staff distribution are followed. Staff distribution must ensure that staff training requirements and background study requirements are met for all times of day that children are present in the classroom. If a staff has a background study clearance notice that states they are required to be under continuous direct supervision, a staff schedule should reflect that they are never working alone with children. The first staff member needed to meet the required staff-to-child ratio must be a teacher. The second staff member must have at least the qualifications of an aide. The third staff member must have at least the qualifications of an assistant teacher. And the fourth staff person must have at least the qualifications of an aide. This pattern must be repeated until the number of staff needed to meet the staff-to-child ratio for each age category has been achieved. It's important to note that distribution is by age category, not by classroom, and this can be a common misconception. So if you have 2 preschool classrooms, your distribution will look a little different than if you have 1. Staff scheduling must meet staff distribution requirements, and staff training and background requirements must be met for all times of day that kids are present. And as you're making your plan, you'll want to make sure that you know who's fully cleared, whose needs required supervision, who's had all their training, who's allowed to work without supervision. You'll need to be tracking all of that, especially in the early days as things are coming together. It's common that centers with 2 or more classrooms may have children from other classrooms in one of the rooms at the early hours and late hours of the day. This is where all of this comes together and where distribution is really important. And for example, one preschool classroom is used for maybe opening and closing and has preschool children for all hours of operation. And the other classroom may only have preschool children in the rooms daily from 8 to 4:30 as they are splitting out with distribution into the second room. And speaking of initial training and orientation, be sure to enter all dates when entering your personnel: the date of hire, the date of first direct contact with children, and the first date of unsupervised contact. And there is a distinction between the date of first direct contact with children, meaning the first day that a staff person will have access to children or their belongings, and the date of unsupervised contact, meaning the first day that that staff person will be working alone with children. And the date of hire may also be different than the date of first direct contact, and it's important to keep all 3 of those distinct. There are training requirements that must be met before first direct contact with children, and additional training and qualification requirements that must be met before the staff person can have unsupervised contact. Note that trainings like abusive head trauma, child passenger restraint, and sudden and unexpected infant death training are only applicable if required by statute for that specific age group or circumstance. For example, abusive head trauma training is required for individuals working with a child under school age. Sudden unexpected infant death training is required for individuals who are working with infants. And child passenger restraint training is required for individuals that place children in child restraint systems in vehicles. In addition, before having unsupervised direct contact with a child, the director and staff persons must complete pediatric first aid and pediatric cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, within the first 90 days of employment, and substitutes and unsupervised volunteers must complete those trainings within 90 days after the first date of direct contact with a child. That was a lot of content. We are going to take a 10-minute break, so let's come back together at 10:26 for the next part of our training. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's dive into part 3 of our presentation about the application and becoming licensed. As we've talked about, getting your child care center licensed in Minnesota is a process involving several steps. And the entire process from submitting your application in the hub to receiving your license can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months, and it depends on a number of variables unique to your application. The Child Care Center license application process is described in phases. In phase 1 of the application process, you will submit an application for a child care center license, which includes submitting information about your program and documentation such as ownership verification, proof of workers' compensation insurance, policies and procedures for staff and parents, and a facility floor plan. These are many of the items we talked about in the prior section. You will be assigned a DCYF licensor who will work with you throughout the rest of the application process. The licensor will begin by reviewing your submitted policies and procedures. In phase 2 of the application process, there are many working parts that both licensors and applicants can be working on simultaneously, and progression through this phase is not necessarily linear. There are many factors that affect how this phase progresses, some of which involve interaction with other agencies for those required facility inspections we've talked about, for background studies, and engaging your health consultant. Additional submissions during this phase include documentation of your administrative, personnel, and children's records requirements, equipment and supplies requirements, and your meal and snack menus. During phase 3, the program is preparing for and scheduling the pre-licensure inspection, which is conducted by your assigned licensor. The pre-licensure inspection needs to occur and documentation of compliance must be confirmed before DCYF can grant your license for your child care center. So we've talked a lot about the Provider Hub. We've mentioned it in that previous section. And so what is the Provider Hub, you may be wondering? And it is an online tool to manage child care licenses and access funding. The Provider Hub allows providers to have 24/7 self-service access to licensing information and a centralized location to complete applications as well as the child care assistance payment provider registration processes. The Provider Hub replaced paper-based processes and created a more efficient and user-friendly experience. We will have Andrew Brace from the Provider Hub team with us towards the end of the presentation, and he will speak a little bit more about an opportunity for new applicants to help improve the Provider Hub experience. So stay tuned for that. Before you create a Provider Hub account and start your application, we strongly recommend visiting the Provider Hub public webpage that currently lives on the Department of Human Services website. And a link to that site is included in your handout. Especially helpful for new applicants on this page are, under the resources section, 2 learning libraries, which are collections of resources on specific topics. So you'll see they have a basics learning library, and this is basic articles about some basic features of using the Provider Hub. And there's also then a licensed child care center licensing learning library, and this is specific for child care center specific processes and articles for using the hub. And these resources for the Provider Hub are available in English, Spanish, Hmong, and Somali. And there's a phone number provided to a language line if an applicant needs help in a language other than English. You will also see on that page release notes, and these share specific improvements made to the online tool. And once you are licensed or have a designated authorized agent set up, these are sent out to authorized agents who are in the hub. There's no sign up required, it just comes out to authorized agents. And you can find links to previous release notes on the Provider Hub webpage. You would also find newsletters that shares general information about the Provider Hub, such as new features, new updated resources, tips for using the tool, things like this. This is sent to people who subscribe to their newsletters. And you can also find information about information sessions. So these sessions share overarching information about the Provider Hub, asking questions, getting answers with the Provider Hub team. You would need to register for the information sessions, but you can also find recordings and handouts from previous sessions and register for the next session on the Provider Hub webpage. Once you have entered and uploaded all required information in the Provider Hub, you will need to read the privacy notice to move on. You'll be asked to upload the applicant agreement, acknowledgement, and verification form. And this form can be found on our website under our Forms that Licensed Childcare Centers Must Use section. This form is included in your handout as well. And you will need to print the form and bring it before a notary where you sign the form and have it notarized. It's important to note that you should print and complete that form prior to logging into the Provider Hub and starting your application. So you want to do that form first so that you can complete the entire application in one sitting. And in order to complete your application, you will be required to pay the non-refundable application fee of $500 online when you're prompted to do so. Once your application has been submitted, our support staff and supervisors will review the application and assign a licensor to it. There may be a little bit of time between when you submit the application and you pay your fee and you submit it, and when you hear from your licensor. There's things going on in the background there. It's being reviewed to make sure it's complete for the business end of things, and then it's being assigned to a licensor. So note that there may be a small gap in time there while you get assigned. Sometimes you may receive a notification requesting more information on something that may have been incomplete, or maybe there was a discrepancy that needs clarification on the business sides of things. An email will be sent to the authorized agent from the Provider Hub titled Childcare Application Assigned to Licensor, and will provide the applicant with the name of the assigned licensor. The assigned licensor will begin reviewing all of your policies and procedures, your floor plan, your org chart, as well as what you listed on your application with regards to the age groups that you want to serve and the capacities for each age group that you want to serve. Then your assigned licensor will reach out to the authorized agent and introduce themselves either by phone or email, sometimes both. At this time, they will provide you with the best way to communicate with them during the application process and throughout the first full year of your licensure. This will be your licensure for your application phase and your first full year. And it's important to note that until the license is issued, the primary contact person for your application will be your authorized agent. During this initial contact from your assigned licensor, they will make sure that you've received the email from the background study unit to set up your NetStudy 2.0 account. And they'll see if you have any questions about setting up that account. And you should begin to run background studies for your authorized agent and your controlling individuals as soon as you can. And note that if any controlling individuals live outside of Minnesota, these studies can take more time. So starting the process as soon as you can is the best practice. Your licensor will let you know of the next steps in the application process, as well as ask when, ideally, when the first day of care that you'd like to start the program would be. And they can go over that timeline with you and give you a better sense of whether that date is feasible or not. They will also provide guidance and answer questions, and this will continue to happen throughout your application process and your first year. Then, your licensor will begin to review your application's policies and procedures. Communication may come from either individual, depending on where in the process the application is and what questions are popping up. If anything is missing or incomplete, a notification will be sent to the provider hub, and you'll have 45 days to submit what's missing. And failure to do so may result in a denial of the license for your program. So you want to be responding to your licensors. Whenever your licensor is reaching out with questions or more information needed, you want to be as prompt as you can in getting back to them with what's needed. Typically that 45-day first notice is about missing, incomplete, or non-compliant language within your policies and procedures that your licensor will be looking for you to fill in and submit. And just as a note, that $500 application fee is non-refundable. So if the 45-day window closes and your licensor hasn't heard back from you, what's needed has not been received, you can resubmit your application, but you may have to pay that fee again. Once your policies and procedures have all been approved, your application will then be moved forward into what's called phase 2. And the next email from the provider hub that the authorized agent will receive will be titled Phase 2 Application Instructions. And the applicant will have provider actions to complete within the provider hub with regards to uploading additional documents and adding personnel. During this phase of the application, inspections will begin moving forward. And with regards to zoning for the building and inspection requests for the building and health department, the inspection requests are taken care of by DCYF, and no additional action is needed by the applicant for that part. Local jurisdiction will contact DCYF and applicant if the zoning is not approved. We often only hear from zoning if there's an issue, if it's not approved. The applicant will need to pay a $50 fee for the fire inspection when their licensor instructs them to do so. The building, health, and fire inspectors will all reach out to you, the applicant, to individually set up those inspections at a time that will work for everyone involved. And you must ensure that a person is on site when these inspections occur that has full access to the entire facility. If codes for the affiliate inspection change, your licensor may not know the details. The inspector for that type of code will be the best resource for questions on this. So for example, fire code, building code, your licensor may not have the answers and will be directing you to that inspector. As a licensed childcare center, you will be required to document and collect certain information that can be accessible to your licensor at any time. In the Forms section of our webpage, you can find checklists for record requirements. There are checklists for administrative, personnel, and children's records located under the title in the Forms section under resource documents that licensed childcare centers can use. And these will help guide you to make sure that you have everything included in a file that you need to have in a file. The center administrative records listed here are records that we would need access to at any time that your program is in operation, and we'll be reviewing during the application process as well as throughout the time your license is active. These records include the information given to parents, personnel records, children's records, child care program plan, your risk reduction plan, your emergency plan, accident, injury log, emergency record, fire and tornado drill logs, your crib inspection form, your staff distribution schedule, separation reports, and your health consultant report. During pre-licensing, for records such as the drill logs, your accident, injury, and emergency record, and separations reports, a method of how you plan to document these things in the future will be reviewed by your licensor. They will know that you will have a blank log, but they'll be looking for some way, however it is that you plan to document these things, where you plan to keep them. Children's records are required to include many items, which are shown here on the slide. And a sample of your child enrollment form and a sample of the form you will use to document children with special needs or allergies can be uploaded if you don't have an actual enrollment record completed for a child waiting to start in your center. If you don't have enrollment yet, you'll just be asked to upload your template forms. And the Minnesota Department of Health has created a system that, as a license holder, you may access immunization records of the children enrolled in your program. The Minnesota Immunization Information Connection, or often called MIIC, is a confidential system that stores electronic immunization records. You need to enroll in this to participate with this system, but MIIC makes keeping track of vaccinations easier. The system is a great help as well when you're required to submit immunization records of enrolled children to the Department of Health yearly. Participating in MIIC is not a requirement, but it is recommended. You can learn how to enroll by visiting the Department of Health website, clicking on Individual and Family Health, Children and Youth Topics, and selecting schools. And the link for how to enroll is also in your handout. You can click right in from there. As a note, licensing rules dictate that the license holder shall not disclose a child's record to any person other than the child's parent or guardian, the child's legal representative, employees of the license holder, and licensing staff, unless the child's parent or guardian has given written consent or as otherwise required by law. The items listed on this slide are the information that's required to be documented and kept up to date for all staff persons that you've hired for your child care center program. The checklist for personnel record requirements, which is located in your handout and again on our website, is very helpful in assisting with organizing what information will need to be entered into the provider hub for personnel and ensuring that all of the record requirements and staff training requirements are met. The form references other documents that have been used to verify requirements. However, all personnel information required for licensing will now be entered in the hub, so please don't be confused when using our forms that have not been updated with an online process. Requirements for personnel include but are not limited to personnel information, like personal information, addresses, phone numbers, qualifications for the position, orientation documentation for orientation training, CPR and first aid documentation, documentation of child development and learning in-service training. And it's important to note that you will not want to begin training your staff on policies and procedures until those have been approved by your licensor. So if by chance you have staff hired, but your policies and procedures have not been given the official go-ahead by your licensor, you will want to hold off on training. If you do train ahead of time, there may be changes to your policies that your licensor requires, and then you will have to redo the training after that approval date. Once you receive the email stating that your application has been pushed forward to phase 2, then that's your go-ahead. You can go ahead and train your staff then. For pediatric first aid and CPR training, all staff must be trained within 90 days of employment. And it's important to note, though, that statute requires staff to be supervised when working with children until this training has been completed. So while there is a 90-day window to complete the training, a staff person may not work alone in a classroom until that training is complete. Your licensor will ask for proof that you meet this requirement by viewing the staff person's card or certificate they received when they completed the course during their on-site licensing visit and then during future licensing visits. Child development and learning training is a training that is required within the first 90 days of employment as well, and then 2 hours of training must be completed every 2 years going forward after that. DCYF also has a requirement of yearly in-service training hours for staff. Full-time staff, meaning that they work on average 20 hours or more per week, must complete 24 hours of in-service training per calendar year. Staff that on average work less than 20 hours per week must complete 12 hours of in-service training per calendar year. Your licensor can help you assess how many hours are needed the first year, as hours will most likely be prorated depending on when in the calendar year your center first opens. However, in-service training hours are not prorated based on how many months of the year a program is open for business, meaning that if you open a program that will only operate during the months of the school year, The in-service training requirements of 24 hours per calendar year for full-time staff and 12 hours for part-time staff remain the same. So the only time you see that prorated is, say you open in November or something like that. You would not be required to have all of your staff have 24 hours of training. Now we'll talk a little bit about pre-licensing. The pre-licensing inspection is considered the last step of the application process prior to being issued a license. You and your licensor will schedule the pre-licensing inspection once your building, health, and fire inspections have been completed and approved. Once all controlling individuals and staff who will be working with children on the first day of licensure have cleared a background study. And once all staff training has been completed and personnel records have been submitted and approved by your licensor. If the application is a change in ownership and the former program is still operating until the new license opens, it's okay to continue operations during that pre-licensing inspection. If the application is for a brand new program, your space should be completely set up and ready to go for children. And this means toys and equipment should all be out, unpackaged, unwrapped, and ready to go. As a helpful tool as you prep for this part of the process is the licensing checklist, which is available as a link in your handout, as well as in the forms section of the licensing childcare website. This is a long Excel list, and it will show all of the items that your licensor is going to be looking for on the day of the visit. And it's great for training and for prep as you get ready to open your center, and as well as when you are preparing for your future licensing visits. Your facility should be all set up and ready to go for children during your pre-licensing inspection. And we recommend reading through Minnesota Rule 9503 a few times prior to the visit, so you know exactly how the facility needs to be set up and what's going to be required. And the checklist is also helpful for that, and we'll walk you through it. But some things to be aware of and to be sure to prepare are your emergency equipment. So making sure that your battery operated flashlight works and turns on. The same for your battery operated radio. Make sure you know where your fire extinguishers are and that they have valid inspection tags. That your first aid kit has all of the required equipment and is accessible. You'll also want to make sure that there are no sharp objects available, no medicines out, no plastic bags out, no poisonous plants or chemicals of any type, no household supplies accessible, that the edges of your rugs are firmly fastened, that your equipment is in good shape, that there's no peeling paint in the classrooms of the facility. You'll want to make sure that you have a designated phone. And if a cell phone is used to satisfy that requirement, the cell phone must be accessible to staff. It must be stored in a centrally located area when not in use, and it must be always charged for use. You should make sure you have supplies such as toilet paper, paper towels, hand soap, facial tissue. It should all be out and ready to go wherever it needs to go. And if you're caring for infants, you'll want to be sure that your cribs meet all infant-safe sleep standards and safety requirements. And you'll want to be sure to hang all required postings that are required to be up in the program. And here are your required postings. So you'll want to be sure that you have hung all of these in the facility. So you will need an evacuation map in each space used by children that indicates the primary and secondary exits and the tornado shelters. And on this map, you'll need to identify the persons that are responsible for each area. So for example, you could say that teachers are responsible for evacuating children from the space, and aides are responsible for grabbing the first aid kit and things like that, so that everyone knows their role during an emergency. You'll want to make sure that the map identifies the building evacuation routes and the off-site relocation site, and that the relocation site is the same site that's listed on your child care emergency plan. You want all of that information to be the same. You will need to have telephone numbers and sources of emergency medical and dental care for the children in your care. You'll want to have numbers for poison control, for the fire department, for the local health authority, and for DCYF licensing division. You want to have these posted somewhere that's accessible for your staff. If your center will have a landline, it's best to have this list of phone numbers posted right near this phone. You will also need instructions on how to use a fire extinguisher and how to close off a fire area, and these need to be posted. You'll need to post diaper changing procedures in all of your diaper changing areas. And if you will be using what's called an experienced aide in your classroom, identification of who those staff persons are and which classrooms they'll be working in will need to be posted for parents to see. And after your license, so once you've made it through your pre-licensing, you'll need to hang your license. And it must be posted in what's called a conspicuous place, so somewhere obvious that somebody will see it within your childcare center. And you'll also post or notify parents of exposed children if you have any reportable illnesses. You'll be posting that as well. So now we'll talk a little bit about classroom equipment. And some of the things you'll want to consider are, does it meet the needs of children that you're going to serve? And is it age appropriate? And this includes the containers that you're storing equipment in as well. Are they plastic or are they glass? Can the paint chip off of it? Are they durable for the kind of use that they're going to get in the classroom? And are they made out of safe materials for children, and particularly for infants and toddlers? Things like wicker are beautiful, but they can shred into pieces that children can pick up and eat. And hard plastic bins could injure an infant if they pull it off the shelf and onto the floor. Can the material break and leave sharp edges? These are all things that you'll want to be thinking about as you're planning out your classrooms and what they're going to look like. You'll also want to make sure that the equipment is accessible to children at all times. And accessible at all times means that the equipment is on an open, child height shelf or tabletop, in an open bin, organized in a way that's developmentally appropriate. If equipment is in teacher height cupboards, or on teacher counters, or in closets, or in reach of children, but in containers that maybe can't be opened by children, that equipment would not be considered accessible at all times. You'll be thinking of how you may want to organize your classrooms. Maybe could some of the pieces of equipment go directly on the shelf, or are containers and bins necessary? You'll want to make sure that all 8 interest areas are represented, and those interest areas are science, arts and crafts, construction, fine motor, gross motor, sensory, dramatic play, and music. And are these all accessible throughout the day to children? And is your equipment clean and in good repair? And in good repair doesn't have to mean that it's brand new, but it does have to be clean and able to work in the way that it was intended and free of hazards. And for an example of this, a dramatic play kitchen that is missing the sink faucet would not be considered in good repair because children couldn't play with the equipment as it was intended without the sink faucet piece. While every center is unique and much of what you purchase for equipment may be based on the layout of the facility, reading the rule and reviewing the equipment list will tell you the basics of what you need. And included in your handout are links to equipment lists for all 4 age categories: infants, toddlers, preschool, and school age. And you'll find it right there in your handout. As well, you can find all of the equipment lists on our Child Care Center licensing webpage, again under forms and other documents and resource documents for child care centers. We understand that as you're getting started, you may not need to open all of your classrooms on the first day of business because of enrollment. However, we can't open or license any classroom space until it fully meets all licensing requirements. And that includes making sure that all of the required equipment is present in the classroom and ready for use. So even if you don't plan to use that toddler room on your first day, if you want it on your license, you'll have to have the equipment in place. Equipment is broken down into age categories, and some pieces of equipment will require you to have a certain number of items, while some equipment is required to be what's called an adequate amount for the amount of children served in the classroom. For example, you're required to have at least one non-folding chair for every child licensed in the classroom. But then when considering art supplies, we're not requiring that you have a 24 count box of crayons for every child, just rather that you have an adequate amount of crayons for each children to be able to participate in an art project where they'd be using crayons. In some situations, more than one group can be in the classroom because the size of the classroom allows for it. For situation-specific questions like this about equipment and groups, ask your licensor to ensure that you're meeting the equipment requirements to be issued a license. It's important to note that as you are purchasing equipment for your center, that you pay attention to the recommended ages for use of the equipment, and only use equipment in your classrooms that's appropriate for the age that's being served within that classroom. Each classroom will be required to have several different types of equipment for the children to use. Large muscle equipment engages the large muscles of the arms, legs, and core of the body by balancing, pedaling, jumping, climbing, rocking, pulling. And large muscle equipment enhances the development of coordination, stability, balance, and control of the body. And it also gets children moving for better physical health and energy release. Infant mobility equipment includes equipment that helps infants move themselves, such as kicking gyms or push toys, riding toys, and infant mobility equipment that helps others move them, such as strollers or wagons or buggies. Visual and tactile stimulating materials. These are things that engage the senses of sight and touch with shapes and colors and textures to explore. And examples of sensory stimulation materials can include things like mobiles, cause and effect activity boxes, sand and water activity materials, swatches of different texture of cloth, and wooden or plastic items of different shapes or colors. Manipulative equipment connects together in different ways. So you're manipulating it with your hands. These could be things like snap blocks or tinker toys, magnet tiles, pop beads. Manipulatives can also be activities that incorporate tongs or latches or locks, lacing cards, stringing beads, pegboards. Manipulatives enhance fine motor skills. So these are your small muscles to prepare for things like writing, tying, zipping, things like that. And then finally, cognitive development equipment can include things like matching games, concept puzzles, magnifying glasses, equipment related to sorting letters or numbers and shapes, nature items, and physical health and hygiene equipment. On the day of your pre-licensing visit, your licensor will count your equipment to be sure that enough is available for the children that are served by the program. You'll need to consider the number of children in each age group, your license capacity for each group, children with any special needs, any equipment that may be shared between groups, equipment for rotating out, things like this. There are equipment items that could be classified as many different types of equipment, but ultimately the applicant can decide what type of equipment an item will be classified as. However, once a type of equipment is counted as a certain type, it can't be counted again as another type to meet requirements. An equipment item may be both a manipulative and a music-making toy, but can only be counted as meeting that requirement just the one time. On the day of your pre-licensing visit, licensors will be looking to make sure that materials are set up in the classrooms and that equipment is organized into clearly defined interest areas that children will have daily access to. Interest areas are defined again as creative arts and crafts, construction, dramatic or practical life activities, science, music, fine motor activities, large muscle activities, and sensory stimulation activities. And taking the time to get your classroom set up with clearly defined and separated interest areas with furniture and equipment arranging in a way that will engage children in activities will also help with your classroom management. So at this time, you will have the facility set up as though it were going to serve children. It could be ready right now with all required administrative personnel and children's records available for review. You should plan to be in attendance to interact with your licensor during the entirety of the pre-licensing review. Other controlling individuals may be required to be in attendance as well if the applicant is an organization or a government entity. A controlling individual should be prepared to answer questions that will indicate their knowledge and their understanding of licensing requirements and the program's policies. And stakeholders, consultants, and attorneys can be present during the inspection, but these individuals cannot interact with the licensor on behalf of the applicant. So if the licensor is asking specific programmatic questions, stakeholders, consultants, and attorneys cannot be the ones to answer those questions. The pre-licensing visit tends to be one of the longer visits that you're going to have with licensing, and the timing of the pre-licensing review varies greatly among programs. Your licensor may be able to provide an approximate time length for your visit depending on the size of your facility as you get closer to the date. Your licensor will also ask you questions regarding rule and statute to ensure your understanding and your ability to be in compliance with rule and statute once you're open. For example, they could ask you about ratios and distribution, or behavior guidance or allergies, hand washing, because your licensor will need to confirm that you have that knowledge on what to do for scenarios that the licensor can't see during something like a pre-licensing visit, because you're not currently open and operating serving children yet. And so they'll be asking you questions to determine how you would handle that scenario. Make sure you're knowledgeable about licensing requirements and your own policies, even if you're using third-party policies. As an applicant or a license holder, the law specifies that you have the ability to demonstrate competent knowledge of the applicable requirements of statutes and rules. So what can you expect from your licensor? Your licensor will inspect the facility to ensure that it meets all requirements. And this includes verifying the measurements in your classrooms, reviewing the space for hazards and maintenance, looking at the amount and the condition of your equipment and your supplies, reviewing that documentation and policies are accessible on site, and asking questions to ensure that the license holder has competent knowledge of all applicable laws, rules, and statutory requirements. And note that most licenses are not granted at the pre-licensing visit, and we want you to be 100% ready to serve children. And if you are, we grant the license, but often there are a couple things that need additional follow-up. If you're looking to open on a Monday, we usually recommend scheduling your pre-licensing earlier on in the week before, so that you have time to complete anything that might be an outstanding item. In some very rare cases, there are things found in pre-licensing review that require a second on-site inspection. And these would be big items such as construction is not complete, or classrooms are not set up, or lack of competent knowledge about rule and statute. And if that's the case, you'll work on completing those items and getting everything ready to go again prior to your second scheduled visit. Once everything is complete and approved, your licensor will inform you that your license is approved, and you must not operate until your licensor informs you that your license has been granted. It may take several weeks to receive the paper copy of your license, but you're able to view and print your license from the Provider Hub and can operate after being granted permission by your licensor. And for this next section, I'm going to hand it off to one of our licensing supervisors, Jay Condon. Jay, are you on?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
You are a little bit quiet.
Does that help? Can you hear me anymore now?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'll just have to talk a little bit louder then so people can hear me. Um, so I'm going to talk here about after a license is issued to a program, once you have made it through the whole application process. Now, we also know and understand that Emma went through a lot of information in this last little bit. Uh, as she mentioned earlier, we are recording this, so this will be available on our website in the future. In the meantime, we do have a previously recorded session that is on the website now. So if you feel like you missed something and you think a little bit later you wish you could listen, you're more than welcome to find that recording and tap into that and re-listen to some of the stuff that's presented at that time. All right. So as we move into our first slide, there we go. So once the licensor has completed their visits and they have told you that you are going to be granted a license with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, you will end up getting a license sent to you. You'll receive that copy of the license. On that license, you're going to get the name of the program, the name of the license holder, address of the program, capacity, including the breakdown of the age groups, any special conditions, and the effective date and expiration date. You're also able in the Provider Hub to print off a copy of that certificate or license directly, but it will get mailed to you. Each calendar year, the licenses do expire, the certificates do expire on December 31st. So you will receive advance notice from us at DCYF that it's going to be expiring and steps to take to pay for that for the upcoming year coming forward. And once that license is issued, all the names on the license holders controlling individuals, they remain with the license, and the license is not transferable to another person or organization. Rule 9503-0170 subpart 3 requires that once you are licensed and operating, that certificate must be posted in that conspicuous or noticeable place. And Emma talked about that a little bit earlier as well. But you're going to want to make sure that it's posted so anybody coming in and out of your program is going to be able to see that. Licensors will check for that while they are on site. As you review through your license each year, you receive a new one mailed to you, again from DCYF. And because of the feature of the Provider Hub, you're able to print one off as well, but they do get mailed out to the program. When you're in the Provider Hub and you want to view that license certificate, you can log in, click on the license number from the program on the home page. You're going to click on the related tab, scroll down to the file box, and then you can see available license certificate. And then you can click on the certificate that will open it and allow the certificate to be downloaded or printed. On the next slide, the changes, if you make changes to your child care center license, it's very important that if you ever want, plan, or need to make changes to your license, to your building, that you are reaching out to your licensor and making them aware. There's a lot of different things that can come into that change where we may need to end up sending out some inspectors and those sorts of things. But we don't want to be going out to programs and find that classrooms have shifted around, walls have been moved around. That can turn into a little bit of a headache. Other changes that can come into play if you're changing an authorized agent, changing your controlling individual, information listed on the Secretary of State, changes to your federal state tax ID numbers that are associated with the license. Again, as we talked about, changes with classrooms, if you're increasing or decreasing, moving preschool and school age around, all of these changes need to be reported to your licensor. Some of these changes could result in a new application, but you would need to talk to your licensor about that, and they will help work you through some of that stuff. Inside that provider hub that we've referenced multiple times, there is functionality available to submit your change request directly through the hub. The licensor then will respond and they'll approve, they'll reject. They may ask for more information in there. They might call you and reach out to get a little bit more information, but they'll work with you through some of that change process as you're going through it. As I stated before, inspections can be involved with building and fire inspectors. It may be a health inspector that's going to come out again. We might need to send something off to zoning again already if you're increasing your capacity. And then some changes also will require verification by a notary, as you had to do earlier to get your application rolling. But again, the key main thing is make sure you're working with your licensor and your licensor is fully aware of the changes that are happening and they will work through all of the changes with you. It's also really important to note that licenses are not transferable, and a change in ownership requires the submission of a new application for that license. So again, in that case, you want to reach out to your licensor, notify them on what's going on, and they'll do their best to expedite any processes to get things moving. We want to ensure that care is being made for children at all times and we're not getting a lapse in that care. As a license holder, you need to make certain that you're staying alert to various communications that's coming from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families Child Care Licensing Unit. We do send out Gov delivery emails to authorized agents, and we also send those off to individuals who subscribe to our email list. And we'll send out those important information emails and updates to them as well. We work hard to not oversend information, but we reserve these sorts of emails with important. So if we can get important information out to everybody in one quick email, we're going to do our best to do that sort of stuff. We do offer various webinars, provider calls, trainings, and we provide other information on our website as well. And there's a lot of great information that is on there. There's also outreach connection webinars at least twice a year. So there's other opportunities for you as a provider to take advantage of those trainings. We're often invited to participate in various conferences and meetings. We do our best to participate in those sorts of things as well. And we can then use that as a way to convey information out to programs in an in-person fashion, whether it's virtual or in person. We do offer develop, approve licensing specific trainings. And then that you've got to watch the news and updates sections on the child care licensing webpage for information on those training opportunities. Legislative updates. So each legislative session provides an opportunity that there may be some changes and updates to licensed child care standards. When the updates need to be communicated, DCYF licensing division does send that out in that Gov delivery, as we were just talking about previously. Those emails will get sent out in a timely fashion within those legislative updates happening. In addition, we do prepare an implementation plan. It's developed and shared with licensed child care centers, explaining how changes can apply to you. The child care licensing webpage has a section that shares implementation plans from previous years. So that's a good spot for you to reference and where you can look through some archived areas of how things have changed in recent years. And then during each legislative session, our partners at Child Care MN offer a bill tracker where you can read about various proposed legislation, and you can watch as it moves through the session. And the local nonprofit organizations and DCYF grant recipients, Think Small, also shares information on policy proposals. So it's a good way to stay alert and be involved in the sessions as things are moving along. So here's just some highlights of some changes that are kind of working right now as we speak. As we mentioned throughout all of this, there's a lot of things happening in childcare in Minnesota right now. Dating back to the 2021 legislative session, there were updates that came out of session that called for some larger umbrella changes to occur for childcare in general throughout the state of Minnesota. We, along with various state agency partners, have been working on many of these initiatives in progress. The intent of these larger system-wide changes have created various ways to better support the childcare industry and benefit programs in each of you. This is focused on childcare throughout the state and should be examples of ways the current administration has committed to supporting the childcare industry throughout Minnesota. So because many of you will become licensed during this time, it's important that you're aware that many of these things go through changes and improvements. So at times, bear with us and understand that transparency and coordinated efforts are priorities for all of these changes. We know that these efforts to improve and make things are a little less complex. The legislators made decisions and allocated funds for the state IT system to transform, make improvements, and become more efficient. These change the ways information is collected by programs to ease some of the paperwork and documentation requirements. An example of this would be the Provider Hub. It is continually being enhanced with more features and more things are getting rolled out in the Provider Hub. Legislators also designated work to go towards streamlining and easing the governing system of early childhood programs and to create a one-stop shop assistance network to support the industry. So they launched the Childcare Wayfinder system, and that was a result of that legislative order. There's also work going on to modernize current childcare regulation system with the Childcare Modernization Project. The current rules for childcare were written back in the 80s, so they're a little old, and therefore we are, and most of our current license holders are very excited to see the rules updated in the way that licensing reviews are completed to be more current. And with this project, the Childcare Modernization Project, there have been multiple ways that current license holders have been able to provide input. We have additional links to more detailed information on our website, so if you want to see that, you can check that out there. Also in today's handout, if you're interested in learning more about the details of the project and stay alert to ways to become involved. And then during each of the past few legislative sessions, recognition for the need to support the industry and capacity building initiatives with various grants and other resources is supporting the industry here in Minnesota. Ongoing staffing needs. You understanding your staffing needs for your program is very dependent on your specific situations. Everybody is different. Knowing how many staff you'll need to open and operate depends on the size of your program. How quick do you plan to grow? Your program budget, along with your program growth, needs to be a delicate balance to understand. Having a good grasp on regulations related to staff ratios, group sizes, staff distribution, and age categories is super important. However, your licensor is a great resource to answer some questions on how they typically see other programs handling various situations. How you address your staffing will cross over into the business aspect of running your childcare program. Therefore, having a strong business sense of the industry can be very helpful. If you feel that you may need that type of support, I'd like to remind you guys about the state's effort to support the industry by partnering with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or First Children's Finance, or by reaching out to your local Wayfinder navigator who may have knowledge or connections to resources in your community. In addition to the requirements associated with your day-to-day staff, if your program chooses to have substitutes or volunteers, it's important to note that there are specific requirements associated with these various roles related to background studies, supervision, and training. Which brings us to training. There are specific requirements for staff that you'll need to understand and develop a plan around each time you hire a new staff person. They will need to be provided with the required trainings as well as meeting ongoing trainings. And there are some resources listed in the resource guide that can be good sources for trainings for you and your staff. As many of our partner agencies provide various develop-approved training opportunities. Staff training, there's a lot more information on the childcare licensing website. It's a lot more detailed and specific about the requirements of various roles in your program. It's important to note too that since trainings must be maintained, the licensors will monitor for this for continued compliance, and therefore documentation of trainings will need to be maintained. So you will need to have that documentation of training for staff on site. Our website has forms that outline what training must occur during orientation and the yearly in-service requirements. Those can assist in tracking as you need to enter information into the provider hub so licensors can again monitor for compliance. We do recommend that people use our orientation and in-service forms that are on the website. It is not a requirement, but we do recommend that you use that. Understanding that your staff and their continued support and growth will be one of the greatest assets in your program's success. Supporting staff and their professional development is not only a great boost to the quality of your program, but also a great strategy for retention. We know staffing is a very difficult thing to manage in your program. And again, reach out to your licensor if you've got questions about some staffing stuff. So some ways to meet some professional development. As we referred to throughout this series, Achieve and Develop are both well-established professional systems for early childhood providers here in the state. Develop has a searchable site to look through approved trainings for staff to meet some of the required trainings. Programs will also need to develop and provide much of their own trainings. And many of the required trainings related to your program will have to be very specific to just you and you only. So Develop can't do those sort of things. In addition to providing trainings, as we just mentioned, license holders are responsible to document trainings and enter the training information into the personnel record in the provider hub, or you can maintain that in a paper fashion on in your program. If educators have an account with Develop, they will have a learning record for all Develop approved trainings that they register and attend to make it easier to do so. And through Achieve, educators can upload transcripts information to track their own career path on their career lattice. As previously mentioned, we have worked to create forms that can assist you with understanding the training requirements that must be completed as a licensed program. As we talked about again, the forms are not required, but they're highly, highly recommended. Those forms will meet your documentation requirements. So please feel free to use those, or you can enter them in the hub. We've talked about Childcare Aware a few times on the presentation here, and they're one of our close partners, and they have many great resources that we have referred to today. We're fortunate enough to have Helen Weil from Childcare Aware MN here to share information about various workforce development resources and opportunities that have been developed to support the growth of our early care educators and professionals throughout Minnesota.
Right.
Hi, I'm Helen Weil. I'm the Empower to Educate coordinator. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep. Cool. All right. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the resources we have at Childcare Aware. We are a statewide network of regional and district agencies that support the professional growth of childcare in Minnesota. We offer coaching, technical assistance, grants and training, professional development advice, as well as support and training for trainers, coaches, consultants, mentors, so kind of the whole childcare system. We offer scholarships for childcare providers to increase their level of education, compensation, and commitment to the field through college credits and degrees like the CDA and higher education. We offer the retain bonus, which rewards childcare professionals who have demonstrated a commitment to the field by continuing their education and professional development. And we have the foreign credential evaluation scholarships, which help evaluate coursework that was completed outside of the US. Next slide. So one of the things that we offer is professional development advisors. These are people who provide guidance on short and long-term goals related to professional development and career planning. They use the Minnesota Knowledge and Competency Framework as a basis for these professional development goals, and they provide intentional and appreciative advising and work to build meaningful relationships with early childhood educators. We have advisors in Parent Aware, we have them in Empower to Educate. They assist with things like workforce navigation and advancement, higher education advising, licensing and variances, the CDA credential, learning community support, more funding support like the CDA awards, Teach and Retain, and credentialing, as well as many other things. Next slide. So Empower to Educate is the program I work in. We provide wraparound services and supports, career skills training and career placement, mentor and mentee opportunities, and career and education advising supports, as well as resources like a statewide job board and our webpage and things. We at Empower to Educate help current and aspiring early childhood educators begin, advance, and sustain their childcare careers through a variety of things. We offer personal support from those workforce advisors, a $300 stipend to help you complete training requirements, a $600 hiring bonus after working in a Minnesota childcare program for 6 months. We offer free training package that comes in English, Spanish, or Somali. We have job skill training like resume writing and interview coaching, help accessing and navigating technology, connections to low and no cost college courses and early childhood certificate programs. We offer the mentorship program, which connects people who are new to the field with people who have been in it for a couple of years and are a bit more experienced and ready to be your cheerleader. Yeah, so Empower to Educate is just a community that's there to help you start and advance your childcare career. Next slide. So one of the big things that Empower to Educate and Childcare Aware as a whole can help with is the CDA awards. These help providers, CDA awards, help providers pay for the required training, application, and renewal of the nationally recognized CDA. Applications are accepted at any time, but awards are distributed on a quarterly basis. And Childcare Aware sets up a voucher with the Council for Professional Recognition to cover $300 of the initial CDA application cost. The application fee and training reimbursement is for anyone who has received a new CDA certificate within 1 year of the first day of the application round. For that, reimbursement is paid directly to, and you may apply for this reimbursement after you have received your CDA certificate. So Teach awards are slightly different. Early care professionals can receive funding to take credits towards an associate or bachelor's degree in child development or early childhood ed at an accredited Minnesota college or university. For family child care providers, center-based staff, or school-age care staff, they can receive funding to take credits towards these degrees. The Teach Scholarship covers 85% of the cost of tuition and books for up to 18 credits per year. Recipients also receive a travel stipend and release time so you can take those classes. And Achieve approved trainers can receive financial assistance to help them increase their career lattice step. That is a stipend per college course. It's $240 per associate level credit and $440 per bachelor's level credit. There's also a $50 bonus for each course completed. After the scholarship end date, recipients commit to instructing at least 3 Achieve approved trainings within 1 year. And then retained bonuses, after you have gone through the CDA, maybe past that, gotten a bachelor's or associate's, the retained bonus rewards early childhood educators who have demonstrated a commitment to the field by continuing their education and their professional development. Retained bonuses can be used for program supplies, trainings, or personal expenses. It's not very strict. There are 2 different retained bonuses offered each year. One is for center-based educators and one is for family childcare educators. Bonuses are awarded annually and range from $1,000 to $3,500. Bonuses are awarded based on education as well as state and federal priorities, as funds allow. Awardees receive half of the bonuses after maintaining employment for 6 months and the remainder after another 6 months. That's a very brief overview of some of the sports we offer. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen. So next, we're going to highlight the Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program. This program is designed to increase compensation for educators who provide direct care for children. Licensed centers are required to use 100% of Great Start compensation funds to increase compensation and/or benefits for staff working directly with children. Funding is available through a monthly application process with payment amounts based on staff hours worked in direct care. Eligible programs can access and submit their applications through the Provider Hub between the 10th and 23rd of each month. Details on eligibility and program requirements are provided in the handout today. And for questions or technical assistance, programs can contact Great Start Compensation Support Team. You can call them at 651-290-9704 or by opening a support case in the Provider Hub. Next is Parent Aware. And the Parent Aware website is our state's consumer website for childcare. Parent Aware is designed to help families find quality care. And Parent Aware Star Rating System is a quality rating and improvement system for childcare providers. And participation offers recognition as a Parent Aware Star rated childcare program. Coaching opportunities, tools, free training, career building, scholarship programs, grant funding, opportunities to serve families that have been awarded early learning scholarships. You could earn higher childcare assistance program rates, and along with connections to various other partner agencies. The Child Care Assistance Program, also referred to as CCAP, is a state government program administered by local county or tribal governments. CCAP serves approximately 30,000 children from 15,000 families each month. CCAP provides financial assistance to help low-income families pay for childcare and helps parents pursue employment or education leading to employment. Licensed childcare programs may participate to receive childcare assistance payments by registering for each county of residence of the families participating in CCAP. And then more information can be found on the DCYF Childcare Assistance Program website that is also included in your handout. And then before we go to our next section, we just want to share another great tool designed for each childcare business to share information about their program. The Childcare Business Update tool is a fast and easy way to regularly update your childcare business information and update the parentaware.org profile for your program. You can update your hours of operation, ages served, and rate information. You can also promote your current openings by age groups. This is the survey that helps provide information to parents using the Parent Aware public site to make informed choices and access your program. Not to be confused, but your program does not need to participate as a rated program to be part of this survey. The survey is intended for all licensed programs so that families can compare programs as they search for childcare. Another great feature is that you can make updates as often as you need. So make sure to get in the practice of using this tool as a way that parents can learn about your program and openings you may have. More than 100,000 people are using Parent Aware each year to search for childcare. So keeping your information, your program's information current for the site can only help your program. So also the results of the survey help to influence policy and decisions related to the market rates of programs throughout Minnesota. The information helped determines the federal CCAP rates as well as other funding opportunities. And again, it's important to note that you do not need to be Parent Aware rated to participate in the business update survey. In fact, the goal is always to get all programs throughout the state to participate so that the state can then provide the most accurate rate information at the federal level, which in turn influences funding back to the state. And then here is just a list of some additional supports that are in your handout resource guide. So a lot of great opportunities for supports to help you along your adventure as a licensed program. Emma, back to you.
Thanks, Jay. And so now we are going to share information on what you can expect once you're licensed with regards to your licensing reviews. So as a licensed program, it's important to understand that programs must maintain that compliance with the various statutes and of our licensing division. And licensors monitor programs for compliance by using an electronic checklist that guides them through the requirements to review and observe. Once you are licensed, licensors and investigators have the right of access. What is right of access? That is that DCYF licensors must be given access without prior notice and as often as considered necessary if they are investigating alleged maltreatment, conducting a licensing inspection, or investigating an alleged violation of applicable laws or rules. This includes access to the physical plant, so the physical location of your childcare center and the grounds where the program is located, documents and records, including records maintained in an electronic format, persons served by the program, staff and personnel records of current and former staff whenever the program is in operation, and the information is relevant to the inspections or investigations being conducted by DCYF. Upon request, the license holder must provide the commissioner verification of documentation of staff work experience, training, or educational requirements. In conducting inspections, the licensor may request and must receive assistance from any other state, county, and municipal governmental agencies and departments. The applicant or license holder shall allow the licensor to photocopy, photograph, scan, make audio or video tape recordings during the inspection of the program at DCYF's expense. Now let's talk a little bit about what you can expect in your first year of licensure. In 2019, childcare licensing was allotted additional funds that allow us to provide extra support to programs during their first year of licensure. You might hear this program called Early and Often. Statistics show that success during your first year of business can prove to be critical to the sustainability of your business to survive long-term licensing requirements, in addition to the business needs, can be difficult. There are many things to keep track of. And we understand the complexity of this, and we have worked to find ways to help businesses get off the ground with greater understanding, hoping that they will find greater success. So what does this first year look like? Once you're up and licensed, you will receive multiple visits in the first year. Your first early and often visit after your pre-licensing review will be about 3 months from your opening date, and it will be scheduled with you with your licensor. This first visit is all technical assistance, no citations. The subsequent visits will happen about every quarter, and those visits are unannounced. These visits allow us to offer extra support and resources to new license holders and help build that extra connection with DCYF. And the goals of these early and often visits are improve success for newly licensed childcare centers to improve the sustainability of your business, better understanding of the DCYF licensing regulations and compliance to other agencies that partner with licensed childcare centers, and improved health and safety of the children in licensed childcare. And now you won't be getting the full checklist every visit throughout your year. It'll be kind of a snapshot every quarter, a smaller checklist that your licensor will go through that lead up to your annual visit, which will be then your full checklist a year from when you opened. After your first year of licensure, your program assignment will likely transfer to a different licensor. The licensor will continue to conduct unannounced inspections of your center on a yearly basis. Conducting yearly inspections allows us to provide more one-on-one technical assistance, answer questions, and assist you in better understanding the licensing standards. Prior to your yearly visit, you will be notified via the Provider Hub that your licensor is requesting updated staffing paperwork. You will follow the instructions in the document, ensuring all the information requested is available in the hub, and this will alert you that your yearly inspection will be coming up within the next couple months, although it won't be scheduled and you will not know the exact date that it will occur. If there are days over the next few months that your program will be closed or that may not be ideal for a licensing visit, please alert your licensor. And although we can't guarantee that we won't come out on those not ideal days, we try to avoid them as best as our schedule will allow. Once your yearly inspection is complete, you can expect an exit interview with your licensor. And during this exit interview, your licensor will go through the visit with you and will discuss any licensing violations found on site, if any. This exit interview may be conducted in person or might be scheduled over the phone after your visit, depending on your availability. Your licensor cannot issue a correction order or licensing action until it's discussed with you during the exit interview. In addition to your yearly review, you could also see DCYF licensing out at your program for investigations throughout the year. If a person has a concern about a license program, they can make a report. Reports can go 3 different ways. If it's determined that the report does not allege abuse or neglect or licensing violations, the report could be screened out. If the report alleges abuse or neglect of a child at a licensed childcare center, it may be assigned to DCYF maltreatment investigators who may complete an on-site investigation. If the report alleges licensing violations, it may be assigned to a DCYF childcare licensor who may complete an on-site investigation. Other agency reports, such as police departments or child protective services, are often forwarded on to DCYF. An on-site visit can result in a number of different finding results. During your yearly review, if no licensing violations are found, you would be issued what's called a licensing review report. Currently, during yearly reviews, a program might receive a licensing action called a fix-it ticket that would be the result of a program showing noncompliance for some predetermined violations that have been recognized to be less severe than others and have been identified as fix-it ticket licensing actions. There are 29 identified specific violations that could result in a fix-it ticket. These 29 identified items are some that legislators have found do not imminently endanger the health, safety, and rights of children in care, but still must be fixed. If any of these 29 items are found during your annual review, your licensor may issue you a fix-it ticket. If a fix-it ticket is issued, that means the program will have 48 hours to fix the violation, and then 7 days from then to send documentation of the correction to the program's assigned licensor. If this is completed, you will not receive a correction order for these violations. More details on fix-it tickets and all of the various licensing actions can be found directly in statute or on our licensing website. Other licensing actions that can occur as a result of a licensing visit or investigation could include a correction order. And this lists items that are not in compliance and that must be corrected. If the licensing issue becomes chronic, numerous, or more serious, something like a conditional license could be assigned, or the program may receive a suspension, or a temporary immediate suspension, or revocation could occur to the license. There are certain licensing actions, such as certain safe sleep or background study or maltreatment violations that could result in a fine. More details on the various types of licensing actions can be found on our childcare licensing webpage. If the applicant or the license holder believes that the contents of the Commissioner's correction order are in error, the applicant or license holder may ask the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to reconsider the parts of the correction order that are alleged to be in error. Information on how to request reconsideration is included with your correction order that's sent to the program's authorized agent. We are often asked how programs can prepare for a licensing review, and the answer to that is really that a licensed program should always be prepared for a review to occur. And as a reminder, licensing standards are the minimum standards for health and safety that all licensed childcare centers must maintain. Ways to ensure that your program is always prepared is to have and incorporate a licensing understanding into the daily practice of your routines, policies, protocols, and trainings. First, ensure all staff have received and understand all licensing requirements and policies and protocols of your program. Have practices in place, such as checklists or routines that just normalize licensing standards as part of the regular day. For example, talk with your staff about ratios and the reason behind distribution so that they also understand the why behind what's expected of them in their jobs. Train them well to understand why it's important to spread out on the playground in order to stay focused and be able to best interact and monitor the children in the care. Establish a system or a regular protocol, such as a checklist that's maintained with each group of children as they transition throughout the building. Model how to use it to always do a face-to-name check of children anytime they cross into a new area. Support staff in their professional development and skills as educators, and make certain that as leadership, all staff have what they need to succeed in their position. This practice will help set a positive culture and ultimately retain staff who are happy, feel valued, and are open to growing and learning. During staff meetings or ongoing trainings, go over various licensing rules with staff and have them actively discuss and come up with ways to ensure that each area of the building understands the expectations and how to achieve them. Licensing publishes an email of recent licensing actions, and these can be used as valuable teaching opportunities. Discuss with the staff the situations and have them talk through what may have happened and how these situations could have been prevented. We know that your staff are very busy caring for the children in care each day, but making the effort to find ways to communicate and incorporate these sorts of practices will go a long way in supporting your staff and creating a positive and compliant environment. Other ways to prepare for a visit are to set up and maintain organized records. I can share that licensing visits go much smoother when the licensor is easily able to go through the information that they need and look at when a program has organized files and systems, and it demonstrates that the leadership understands the expectations. Using the Provider Hub to maintain documentation and requirements should help as long as you make certain that you are keeping it maintained with current information. As a licensing division, we've created many resources to help you stay organized. We create forums to break down the requirements and ensure that if you fill out the form completely, you'll likely also better understand and be able to meet what's being asked of your program. In the same way, the Provider Hub has been designed based on licensed provider and licensor feedback to ease documentation requirements. As we live into using the Provider Hub, we are committed to making updates, again based on user feedback, to help make the system as user-friendly as possible. You can also watch for and read any Gov delivery emails that provide crucial information from licensing. You can stay alert to other forms of communication from us, such as websites, webinars, training, our implementation plans, the Early Childhood Connector newsletter, things like that. As we mentioned at the start, you should make that revisor statute website a favorite on your computer, and when you have a question about rule or statute, go directly to that actual rule and statute and read the text to know your requirements. You can also always reach out to your licensor and our licensor on call line if you have questions about the licensing standards. And if you can, it's important to make connections with other childcare programs or associations like directors groups for that connection and knowledge sharing. It's important to stay alert, stay connected, and get involved where you can. And as a reminder, these suggestions are not requirements from us, but we do see that these are things that help you stay prepared and gain that ongoing compliance. Federal requirements mandate that our licensing division post statewide information on deaths, serious injuries, and instances of substantiated maltreatment that occurred in licensed childcare settings each year, and these are posted publicly on the Minnesota Parent Aware website. DCYF has also used licensing information lookup since 2010 to offer the public the results of licensing reviews and to meet federal requirements to do so. And links to Parent Aware and licensing lookup are in your handout. And now I'm going to hand it off to Andrew Brace for our last slide. He's from our Provider Hub team to talk about an opportunity to help us out with the Provider Hub experience. Andrew, are you on?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Emma. Hi, everybody.
Great.
My name is Andrew Brace. I'm one of the experienced design strategists working with the digital services team at DHS. And my job is to work on kind of the look and feel of the Provider Hub, as well as make sure that when you're in there and you're trying to complete a certain task, that it feels satisfying to you, that it's effective, that it gets you where you need to go, and you can complete your work in the Provider Hub so that you can get back to taking care of kids. And I'm here today to make a call for some volunteers for some design research testing. So I just wanted to go over that with you pretty quick. So first of all, just why might you want to participate in some design research? First and foremost, we can build something better together. As in experienced design strategists, very much at the core of what we believe is co-design, human-centered design. And that if we're making a tool for you to do your work, I very much believe that that depends on meeting with you and talking about how that tool can best serve your needs. Beyond that, you'll get to impact some design decisions and making sure that the Provider Hub is working as effectively as you might like, as well if you're someone who might be feeling a bit of uncertainty or anxiety about getting into the Provider Hub. This can give you a chance to have a little sneak peek at not only the application process, but other kind of functions throughout the hub as well. You might be asking yourself, why me? Why would I be a good candidate for design research? Well, if you have yet to apply for licensure in the Provider Hub, that gives you kind of the freshest perspective on the hub. And we really like having those new eyes and just getting fresh information from users who have yet to kind of make their way through the hub. As well, if you're in this meeting right now, I'm going to assume that you have access to the internet, a laptop or a desktop with a mic and a camera. Usually the design research we perform is remote, so you can do that from your home or your office, but you do need to have those couple of tech requirements in place. As well, you need enough tech experience to screen share on Microsoft Teams. With that piece, if you are apprehensive or you're not sure how to screen share on Microsoft Teams, just let one of the design team members know, and we would be happy to walk through that with you prior to any design testing that might go on. In terms of what is usability testing, as I said, it's usually a remote session. They can last about 60 minutes. Usually it's shorter than that. But if you're thinking of signing up for design testing, I would try and budget at least an hour for you, just in case things run a little long. It's a think out loud process. So say we were doing testing on the initial application, we would have you begin your application and you would move through it saying, oh, I'd click here, maybe I'd click that. Oh, I'd opened up a new page and I wasn't expecting what I saw on that screen. I'd expect something else. So really it's just you kind of having a running monologue with the design team as you move through some structured tasks, and we get to listen to you and understand what your process is like in the Provider Hub. That is all to say, and I want to make this point very clear, it's not a test for you, it is a test for the hub. If you're someone who gets a bit of anxiety again about testing, or just the word test makes you feel a little uncomfortable, this is not a test for you as the user. This is a test to make sure that the hub is serving you, the user, as best it can. So I do want to say, just in terms of signing up, a call for volunteers will be sent out to folks in this webinar, attendees after we're done here. As well, you could just email me at my email address to be added to the participant pool. Disregard that last bullet point on there about test sessions tentatively scheduled for mid-September. We're obviously past that. And we've got a bit of a rolling calendar right now for design research. So disregard that last bullet point. As I said, I'll be reaching out to everybody who is attending as well. If you want to just go ahead and get on my radar, you can feel free to email me at andrew.brace@state.min.us. So that's it for my plug. Thank you so much for giving me a couple of minutes, Emma. I'll pass it back to you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks, everyone, for attending. We will stay around for the next 3 minutes or so for any final questions that come through the chat. And we hope that you learned something useful today.
Well, Don's got a question. How often are visits for running centers? Are you talking, Hodan, about how often licensors come out to the program? So Emma went over that first year. You'll get those early and often visits after a license is issued, where they'll come out 4 times total in that kind of that first 365 days at minimum. After that, once you're off early and often, it'll be at minimum once a year at this point in time for your yearly annual inspection. But that doesn't include possible changes to your license where we need to come out and do some things and check some things. That does not include investigations where we may be coming out and investigating some things. So it could be more. So that's where the minimum once a year comes in. And LaShawn, so is it someone we are appointed to do? So are you talking about your original licensor that you're given once your application is submitted, LaShawn? Okay, so you'll submit your application. That information will come into us, and if you have everything that we need, yes, it will get assigned to a licensor. And then that licensor will get in touch with you once they have said application, and kind of start beginning to work you through the process of everything. That can always look different for many different applications, how things are filled out and all those sorts of things. But yes, you'll get an assigned individual to work with, and majority of the time, that individual is who you will work with throughout that whole application process. And then again, a majority of the time, that's the individual you'll work with through the first year of being open. But that can change as caseloads ebb and flow for licensors. So does a Wayfinder candidate help you through the entire process, and will it be a single person assisting? I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. Emma, do you have any information on that with Wayfinder?
I don't have an exact answer, but I know the navigators are regional. So you will be assigned to somebody who's in the region where you are wanting to open your center. I believe you are assigned to one navigator and they have something like a caseload. And I don't know much more of how it functions, but I do believe you're assigned to a person, a regional navigator's caseload, who will be with you as long as you need it.
Perfect. Thanks, Emma. It appears there's maybe no more questions coming in, so we can probably end
That sounds great.
the
Thanks for
meeting.
sticking around, Jay, and thanks for
Yep,
sticking around, everyone who hung out for these last couple questions. And have a good rest of your day.
thanks.